Okay, first, on the FBI's most wanted list, Osama bin Laden is not charged with the crimes of 9/11. When I called the FBI to ask them why this was the case, they replied, "There's not enough evidence to link bin Laden to the crime scene." I later discovered he had never even been indicted by the DOJ.
Okay, so you said 10, next.
Number 2, FBI translator Sybil Edmonds was dismissed and gagged by the DOJ after she revealed that the government had foreknowledge of plans to attack American cities using planes as bombs as early as April 2001. In August of '09, Mrs. Edmonds broke the federal gag order and testified under oath that Osama bin Laden, Al-Qaeda and the Taliban were all working for and with the CIA up until the day of 9/11.
Very interesting, carry on.
Number 3, the following is a quote from Mayor Giuliani during an interview on 9/11 with Peter Jennings for ABC News. "I went down to the scene, and we set up headquarters at 75 Barclay Street, which was right there with the police commissioner, the fire commissioner, the head of emergency management, and we were operating out of there when we were told that the World Trade Center was going to collapse. And it did collapse before we could actually get out of the building, so we were trapped in the building for 10-15 minutes, and finally found an exit and got out, walked north, and took a lot of people with us who told him this." To this day, this question remains unanswered, completely ignored and emphatically denied by Mayor Giuliani on several public occasions.
Wow, please continue.
Number 4, in April 2004, USA Today reported, in the years before the September 11th attacks, the North American Aerospace Defense Command conducted exercises simulating what the White House says was unimaginable at the time: hijacked airliners use it as weapons to crash into targets and cause mass casualties. One of the targets was the World Trade Center. Number 5, on September 12, 2007, CNN's Anderson Cooper 360 feet reported that the mysterious white plane, spotted and videotaped by multiple media outlets, flying in restricted airspace over the White House shortly before 10 a.m. on the morning of 9/11, was in fact the Air Force's E-4B, a specially modified Boeing 747 with the communications pod behind the cockpit, otherwise known as the Doomsday Plane. Though fully aware of the event, the 9/11 Commission did not deem the appearance of the military plane to be of any interest, and did not include it in the final 9/11 Commission report.
Go on.
Number 6, 3 F-16s assigned to Andrews Air Force Base, 10 miles from Washington, D.C., are conducting training exercises in North Carolina, 207 miles away as the first plane crashes into the WDC. Even at significantly less than their top speed of 1,500 miles per hour, they could still have defended the skies over Washington well before 9 a.m., more than 37 minutes before Flight 77 crashes into the Pentagon. However, they did not return until after 9:55 a.m. Andrews AFB had no armed fighters on alert and ready to take off on the morning of 9/11.
Let me guess, 7.
Number 7, WDC Building 7. Watch the video of its collapse.
Number 7, WDC Building 7. That was fast.
Number 8, Flight 93 is the fourth plane to crash on 9/11 at 10:03 a.m. Vice President Cheney only gives shoot-down orders at 10:10 to 10:20 a.m. and this is not communicated to NORAD until 28 minutes after Flight 93 has crashed. Fueling further suspicion on this front is the fact that 3 months before the attacks of 9/11, Dick Cheney usurped control of NORAD, and therefore he, and no one else on planet Earth, had the power to call for military sorties on the hijacked airliners on 9/11. He did not exercise that power. 3 months after 9/11, he relinquished command of NORAD and returned it to military operation.
I'm listening.
Number 9, scores of mainstream news outlets reported that the FBI conducted an investigation of at least 5 of the 9/11 hijackers being trained at U.S. military flight schools. Those investigations are now sealed and need to be declassified.
We are having trouble getting the Congress to investigate the FBI.
Number 10, in 2004, New York firefighters Mike Belloni and Nicholas D. Macy went public to say they had found the black boxes at the World Trade Center, but were told to keep their mouths shut by FBI agents. Nicholas D. Macy said that he escorted federal agents on an all-terrain vehicle in October 2001 and helped them locate the devices, a story backed up by rescue volunteer Mike Bellone. As the Philadelphia Daily News reported at the time, their story raises the question of whether there was some type of cover-up at Ground Zero.
It does indeed, yes.
Number 11. Hundreds of eyewitnesses including first responders, fire captains, news reporters, and police all described multiple explosions in both towers before and during the collapse.
Eyewitnesses say?
Number 12. An astounding video uncovered from the archive shows BBC News correspondent Jane Stanley reporting on the collapse of WDC Building 7 over 20 minutes before it fell at 5:20 p.m. on the afternoon of 9.1.1. Tapes from earlier BBC broadcasts show news anchors discussing the collapse of WDC 7 a full 26 minutes in advance. The BBC at first claimed that their tapes from 9.1.1 had been lost before admitting that they made the error of reporting the collapse of WDC 7 before it happened without adequately explaining how they could have obtained advance knowledge of the event. In addition, over an hour before the collapse of WDC 7, at 4:10 p.m., CNN's Aaron Brown reported that the building has either collapsed or is collapsing.
Wow, this really gets interesting.
Number 13. Solicitor General Ted Olson's claim that his wife, Barbara Olson, called him twice from Flight 77, describing hijackers with box cutters, was a central plank of the official 9/11 story. However, the credibility of the story was completely undermined after Olson kept changing his story about whether his wife used her cell phone or the airplane phone. American Airlines confirmed that Flight 77 was a Boeing 757, and that this plane did not have airplane phones on board. According to the FBI, Barbara Olson attempted to call her husband only once, and the call failed to connect. Therefore, Olson must have been lying when he claimed he had spoken to his wife from Flight 77. The technology to enable cell phone calls from high-altitude airline flights was not created until 2004, and even by that point, it was only in the trial phase. Calls from cell phones, which formed an integral part of the official government version of events, were technologically impossible at the time.
No phones, yes, that's right.
Number 14. The size of a Boeing 757 is approximately 125 feet in width, and yet images of the impact zone at the Pentagon supposedly caused by the crash merely show a hole no more than 16 feet in diameter. The engines of the 757 would have punctured a hole bigger than this, never mind the whole plane. Images before the partial collapse of the impact zone show little real impact damage and a sparse debris field completely inconsistent with the crash of a large jetliner, especially when contrasted with other images showing airplane crashes into buildings.
Small hole, yes.
Number 15. What is the meaning behind the following quote attributed to Dick Cheney which came to light during the 9.1.1 Commission hearings? The passage is taken from testimony given by then Secretary of Transportation Norman Mineta. During the time that the airplane was coming into the Pentagon, there was a young man who would come in and say to the Vice President, "The plane is 50 miles out, and the plane is 30 miles out." And when it got down to the plane is 10 miles out, the young man also said to the Vice President, "Do the orders still stand?" And the Vice President turned and whipped his neck around and said, "Of course the orders still stand. Have you heard anything to the contrary?" As the plane was not shot down, in addition to the fact that Armed fighter jets were nowhere near the plane and the Pentagon defensive system was not activated, are we to take it that the orders were to let the plane find its target?
I'm not sure.
Number 16. In May 2003, the Miami Herald reported how the Bush administration was refusing to release a 900-page congressional report on 9.1.1 because it wanted to avoid enshrining embarrassing details in the report, particularly regarding pre-9.1.1 warnings, as well as the fact that the hijackers were trained at U.S. flight schools.
Embarrassing, all right.
Number 17. Top Pentagon officials cancel their scheduled flights for September 11th on September 10th. San Francisco Mayor Willie Brown, following a security warning from the White House, canceled a flight into New York that was scheduled for the morning of 9.1.1.
I wonder why.
Number 19. On April 29, 2004, President Bush and Vice President Cheney would only meet with the commission under specific clandestine conditions. They insisted on testifying together and not under oath. They also demanded that their testimony be treated as a matter of state secret. To date, nothing they spoke of that day exists in the public domain.
Yet, I know that is true.
And finally, Mr. President, number 20. A few days after the attack, several newspapers, as well as the FBI, reported that a paper passport had been found in the ruins of the WDC. In August 2004, CNN reported that 9.1.1 hijackers Iagera's visa was found in the remains of Flight 93, which went down in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. At least a third of the WDC victims' bodies were vaporized and many of the victims of the Pentagon incident were burned beyond recognition. And yet, visas and paper passports, which identify the perpetrators, and back up the official version of events, miraculously survived explosions and fires that we are told melted steel buildings.
Well, we are transparent now, so we will get to the bottom of all this, if it is the last thing we do. There are only two kinds of government. One the people are in charge of, and the other where the government is in charge. This truth you bring will be the end of war. Thank you very much for the information. Imagine love, light and truth.